Hi, I'm Mark Honeybone from Property Ventures, and welcome to our weekly podcast where we interview prominent members of the investment community along with other professionals in the New Zealand property market. This is a free service from Property Ventures so that you can keep current and learn from some of the best around New Zealand. To check us out, take a look at propertyventures.co.nz. We hope you enjoy today's podcast. Welcome back to the second part of this interview with Rosie Killip. We talk more about councils and go on to talk about what you should do before selling or buying a property. We hope you enjoyed today's interview. The government manual says you don't need consent for it, so you go ahead and do something. You know, your advice would be to just keep photos, document everything that you've done, just in case it ever comes back to you. But by law, you are covered, I guess.
That's right, you're entitled. If what you're doing fits in with the scope of the law, then you're good as gold. What I'm saying is socially, and market forces being what they may, insurers being what they are, You may like to just keep your own photos. I think that's a grand idea. A floor plan with any adaptations of things that you've moved or shifted around. A list of the tradies who helped you, maybe some products that you used in the reconstruction of something, just so that you've got that more for informational purposes on the future. As we know, as we talked about earlier, some buyers are a little bit more buyer beware than perhaps those who own property just at the minute.
Okay, so and again, you're just the messenger here. You're not the council. Why do the council ask people to get consents for almost anything? I know some people out there will go, it's just a money making exercise. I suppose it comes down to their education too, and I suppose the council, what are they trying to just protect themselves?
Look, the minute a council officer steps on a property, they're taking on liability. So really, my advice to the council themselves is keep away from this area. So if you're getting that advice from a council, this is a good public service. They're probably doing it because they want to protect you from your own harm, protect you from yourself or from a building industry that may not be as well trusted as we might like to think.
Just on that point, if you went to the council and asked, do I need a consent for doing something in the kitchen you don't need a consent for, and then you find out afterwards you don't need a consent before you've actually done the job, if the council have told you to get a consent and then you realise you don't have to, what's the deal then? Do you...
Look, I think again, you justify yourself by saying, I've got two conflicting bits of advice. Am I going to back myself? Am I 100% certain that I am correct? Have I taken any other advice into account? Naturally, councils are risk averse and they like to ensure that work is done correctly because strangely it comes to bite them down the track. Long after we're gone as investors or property owners, that council will still be standing, and some new officers in the future will have to justify decisions made today and advice given today. So what I would suggest is if you think, no, the council officer was wrong and I am right, you copy and paste whatever you have consulted with, whom you've talked to, and pop that back in this folder we've been talking about. So you've got a nice little track record and paper trail of how you've come to your decision.
I was on your site today and I saw a great wee 6-minute video, and you might be able to share some of it with the listeners now. And it's funny, it's the question will be, what could you do before selling a home to make it easier for the buyer? So the investors out there want to sell their property. And interestingly enough, sometimes the person selling the property doesn't want to do a hell of a lot. They just want to sell their property. But do you want to expand on what your advice would be if you are out there, the investor, you want to sell your property? What you would do?
Look, absolutely, Mark. I'd be delighted to. And in fact, I'm just dealing with a client at the moment who is in Australia selling one of their rental properties, and he's absolutely gobsmacked that we are not forced in law to do some of the things I'm going to advise us to do, because they are. They have to front up as the vendor with a whole lot of compliance information in a pack. And I think that's great. It comes down to the bottom line. If you want a quick sale, make it easy for someone else to buy your property. You might have been a goat and bought this property without knowing all this information, or you may have just taken on the risk. You may have just thought it was legit. That's fine. Deal with your past as it may be. But going forward, if you don't want all the stress, all the emotion, all the chasing your tail in the middle of a negotiation, get these things in a pack and have them at the ready, because this is disclosure, right? This is disclosure of the facts, rather than saying to the purchaser or purchasers plural, go discover this for yourself and good luck in your due diligence process. You're doing the due diligence so that you don't get any surprises as the vendor. I've had clients who've rung me in tears, stressing out because settlement day's on its way, they think. Meanwhile, during the discovery process of a land information memorandum or a building report, my goodness me, the purchaser has found out secrets about the dwelling the vendor didn't even know about.
Right.
Like, oh my goodness, this building had a leaky building claim lodged with the Weathertight Homes Tribunal. Wow, that's a pretty powerful surprise to get landed on your lap in the middle of a sale. And a lot of these sales fall over because of what the purchaser discovers that the vendor had no knowledge about. So here's the thing. When you thinking about putting your property on the market, quietly and discreetly go and find out what council knows that, quite frankly, you might not know. So go find out. Go do your own property search. Go get your own limb. Go see what else might be outstanding when you read a limb. How many people read a limb? The lawyer says, go get a limb. Got one. Yay. But what does it say? It might say ugly. It might say, oh my goodness, there's an outstanding building consent that's never been signed off for that fireplace, for example. It might say, you know what, there was a notice to repair your roof and you've never done nothing about it. There could be outstanding rates. Hopefully you know that one. There could be a historic classification. There could be zoning requirements. You could be on a liquefaction area, since we know now more about the ground that we build on. So these are things to be disclosed and known, because then you get real about the price. People always have an inflated view about price. But really, someone might like to buy the lemon that you've got and make lemonade out of it, but they want it at a price of a lemon. Yeah. If you think you've got a sweet bottle of lemonade, you're talking in two different voices and you haven't even got the property sold yet. So, no surprises. Find out, get the information yourself, put it in a pack, get real then with your real estate agent about what you're going to sell for, and then you have hand on heart disclosed the issues. Now, what happens if you find ugly? If you find, oh my goodness, I didn't know, but the person before us did some building work that did not have a building consent, and now we know that, we have to disclose it. Is there any way to remedy it? Yes, there is. It's a different piece of paper than a code compliance certificate, but there's still a way to redeem yourself. You know what? Again, the worst to the worst, if you find something that's really bad, you might choose to throw a little bit of money at it, take out a consent to get whatever it is remedied, removed, repaired, replaced, and then get it signed off so that you can, again, hand on heart say, you know what, this property is good for sale.
And it's far better you finding out as a seller rather than the buyer when they think they've got a great property.
And at your leisure, if we're talking about a tenanted property, there are your tenants. they're still in it. There's still some income coming in the door. You haven't gone to sell it yet, but now you know, and you can sit down and think without all the emotion and the stress about, so what are we going to do to redeem ourselves here? How can we recover the situation, not during a stressful and highly emotive negotiation where you are in shock because you did not know something in that building now exists.
And it gives you, the vendor of the property, control over the sale almost. I mean, you're providing everything. There are no surprises. You're providing everything they need. You don't have to wait 10 days for their limb because you've got it there for them.
And you know what? The limb is not the least of the problems. What about builders' reports?
Yeah.
You know, I've got a lot I can say about that, because a lot of people say, you know, they tick that little circle on the sale and purchase agreement. I want a builder's report. You know what? I'd say what we're actually discussing is a proper pre-purchase house inspection by a qualified person using the New Zealand house inspection standard.
Yep.
Photographs, written detail, again, much worth your while than leaving it up to any old Joe calling himself a builder and making a builder's report who knows nothing about nothing. Good guy, likeable guy, probably related to the purchasers, a trusted friend of the purchasers, but in terms of technical building is maybe falling short. You know, people make these judgment calls about things, asbestos, leaking, structure. Well, you know, I'd like to know as the vendor, not any old person's running through my dwelling making those emotive comments, especially in our small communities. That stuff goes around like wildfire. You know, ooh, so-and-so's got their house on the market. Ooh, did you know it's a whatnot label?
Yeah.
Well, who the heck are they to say such a thing? Where's their qualification? You know, so I get a little bit grumpy about that, as you can probably tell.
Yeah, we'll come into a story about that soon that I've got, actually. We'll move on to that shortly. That's great if you provide it all. I mean, again, the building report is something the purchaser, some purchasers are great and don't mind, but some purchasers they just don't want to fork out that extra $400, $500, $600 to do it. So again, if you provide it all, it's got to be a great sale and comfortable for everyone looking at buying it. They've got everything at their fingertips, and I mean, geez, sellers get out there and do it that way.
Look, I think that's a really good message, because who's in control of the sale? I must say I've been on all different sides of this equation, and as the vendor, you know, it's my property. I'd want to be in control of this process. In fact, I had a wonderful situation selling an older dwelling that I had, and the real estate agent just about tore his hair out with me, because, you know, I knew what I had. I knew it's vintage. I knew the goods, the bads, and the ugly. I'd lived in the dwelling, so I knew how it rock and rolled. And when the purchase came to me with an offer and made some various judgment calls, again by an unqualified person, because they wanted a second opinion. You know, they didn't even trust my own report that I'd commissioned. I'm like, you know what, you're allowed to, you go for your life, because you've got to be satisfied again as a purchaser. It's a big commitment for most people. Nevertheless, the report was nonsense. Absolute nonsense. And I declared that, you know, hey, I do this stuff for a living, right? I do building compliance for a living. So, you know, it's not good on my watch to sell or buy something which has got compliance issues. You know, like if anyone they're going to buy from, they could be comforted with what I do. Nevertheless, you know, they come up with all sorts of mystery and legend and smoke and mirrors, and I thought, you know what, I don't need this. Yeah. I needed to sell the dwelling, right? I already had a pressure on my shoulder, but I just don't need this. So I walked away from the sale, and it was a really powerful message to me about standing up for myself and backing my own knowledge. Nevertheless, these same purchasers came racing back to me and said, hang on a second, we want to buy it nevertheless.
Yeah.
Right? We want to buy it nevertheless. I'm like, well, nevertheless of what? I've told you the facts. If you don't know these things. Another agency I'd highly recommend for people is Brands, the Building Research Association of New Zealand. Brands.co.nz is their website. They're independent, they're a research body in the building industry, and they have lots of really good products and publications like how to maintain your home, do those proactive things. But you can also ring the 0900 number there as a building owner and say, look, I've found something, or a purchaser has found something, you know, give me a bit of technical guidance here. And you can get some really good stuff at the end of that 0900 number.
Just actually one thing, moving on with that is, this will probably happen more, what we've just been talking about, when the vendor's getting ready to sell their property. Do you just want to tell the listeners what a code of acceptance is?
I will indeed. So when we enter into a building consent agreement with the council, you know, we've found work that we want to do which does constitute a consent. We need to get all the things done, inspections by the council, documents that they require, sometimes as-built drawings or other pieces of paper from the tradies, and collect it all up at the end and apply for what's called a code compliance certificate, otherwise known as a CCC. It needs to be done smartly. The law says it should be done within a 2-year cycle from the start of your consent. A lot of people forget to do it. Naughty. A lot of tradies do the working people pay them without this piece of paper in the hot hand of the owner. Naughty. Get that CCC in your hot little hand. It is gold. It means that the council is satisfied the work complies to the extent the consent they gave in the first place. So if you have ever taken out a building consent since the 1st of July 1992, you should have got a companion CCC piece of paper. If you haven't, it's not too late. Get onto that today. Go and apply to the council, no matter how old the product or building item is. If you've taken out a consent from 1 July 92, you need it signed off. That's the final sign-off, the final okay by the council. Now, old work has its own problems. It's a process that the council officers will step you through. However, going forward, please, please, please make sure you get this work consented and get the work signed off, and then you are done, safe as houses, to move forward knowing that you've got some independent authority saying the work complies with a consent.
Yeah, I'm surprised how many properties I actually come across who people haven't got that final consent. It's sort of I see far more than I should see. And just another tip I'd probably just put onto that also is when you get an electrician or a plumber to do some work, maybe it doesn't need consent. They have their own electrical certificate that you definitely need when you've paid your bill to them. And I know they won't give it to you normally until you pay the bill.
And look, that's a really good point. So the two tradies who are what we call self-certifying, and there's only two, are electricians and gas fitters. Plumbers do not self-certify. Drain layers do not self-certify. Builders, tilers, roofers, brick and block layers, concrete placers, away we go.
Yes.
So if you get your certificate of compliance or energy work certificate from a gas fitter who has fitted some, say, gas heating device for you, or an electrician who's fitted a heat pump for you, that's a really good leverage tool for them to be paid and you to know that it complies. If we've got any other work that is consented, those other tradies I've just mentioned have to have had the building inspectors or plumbing inspectors from the local council check their work. And if the council's not happy, here's a tip. They're going to come back more than once. So often on a dwelling, a brand new dwelling, we get to what we think is the end of the job. The builder rocks up and rings the council, perhaps on your behalf as the owner. Council officer comes. It is rare, and I mean rare, for the council officer to come once to do a final. They usually come twice, and sometimes 3 times,
Yep.
which suggests to me something that the builder is not 100% sure he's finished. And if the council officer's coming a second or third time, guess who pays the bill for that? Not the builder, you, as the client. So I would just be a little bit cautious around that stuff and say, hang on a second, if I'm paying for more inspections than what I originally budgeted for, it's not the council being over picky. It's like, hang on a second, maybe these tradies I picked just don't know how to finish.
Yeah, and it's fine getting any tradie for a small unconsented job. And I totally agree with what you're saying. If you're having any consented job or a new build, check out the builders, check out the subbies, and just make sure they are good, ethical, and good workers.
And look, one of the nice things about little old New Zealand is in our smaller communities, you can offer trade secrets about that. You know, there used to be websites about these things, about giving reviews around tradies. However, the grapevine works a treat. So if you want to know who's good, it's not, at the end of the day, a consent is a relationship, not just a building compliance item. It's a relationship between the client, the tradie doing the work, the designer who drew it in the first place, and you, the client. So if someone says as an architect, drafty or tradie, I hate council, they suck, they don't do very good work, they're a pain to deal with, go, thank you for sharing. Next. Give me somebody who has a good working relationship with the council, because they're going to have to negotiate on my behalf to get my house built.
Yeah, definitely. Good. That's a great tip for the complaining. Get rid of them.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Just moving on, I know I got sidetracked before. I know what I was going to ask you before, but I'll move on to that now. We spoke about what the vendor the seller, the vendor of the property should do. I guess on the other hand, when you're buying a property, it's the same in reverse. If the vendor hasn't supplied anything, you virtually just do exactly the same things we spoke about before. And that's what I love. I'm a negotiator. I love negotiating. Love finding I love finding faults, but anything that we can negotiate on is important. And we spoke about when people like me can't negotiate.
I would say this: gather the facts and then make an educated and informed decision. It's really easy. I've done it myself to make an emotional decision. I know enough now to be confident and back myself from what I'm looking for and what I'm prepared to tolerate, what I will buy into. So for me, sometimes I take a look at something and make a decision based on my 22 years of knowledge. For those who are green to this area, mentors are fantastic, who will help guide you through the steps of the process. Don't just pick someone because they're related to you and used to be in the building industry, right? Pick someone who's not even emotionally charged or knows you, who's not a friend, a colleague, or a family member. Pick someone who's neutral. Go and have a look at the condition of the building. If you don't know what you're looking for, don't know what you're looking at, get a professional house inspector to take a look, who uses the New Zealand House Inspection Standard, who writes a report and has photos. And yes, it's a few $100s. The irony for me there, Mark, is that people will go and get a vehicle inspection done on a vehicle that's worth $5,000 or $10,000, right? And proportionately not spend that same money on a dwelling that could be $500,000 or $600,000.
Yeah, that's a crazy mindset some people have. That's for sure. Plastered buildings, horrible word. Some people think and say. Does that mean don't buy, don't touch?
Look, if that was the case, we might as well take some TNT and go and bomb everything that we can find, that looks anything like it.
Yep.
At the end of the day, they are rentable. People rent them. Some people, yes, live in them. Some people demolish them and rebuild. Not all plaster-clad or monolithic-clad buildings leak in the way that creates failure. We've had some systemic issues, there's no doubt about that. All buildings leak. They're designed to leak. They're designed to dry out and therefore designed to protect the main structure of the dwelling. What we face is some of the way that these buildings are constructed as if we lived in a Mediterranean climate, are built with certain key risk areas that have been proven to fail. So as I say, it's not so matter about don't touch, but understand what you're touching it for. If you're touching it saying, I know this one's got some building failure, I'm picking it up cheaply, you're going to have to throw some money at it to redeem it.
And quite often it's building failure of other bits and pieces rather than actually the plaster. Usually it just happens to be the same era a lot of the time when sloppy workmanship was done. And
look, I agree. I once thought I should live in a house truck because I knew too much about buildings, right? I knew too much about it's an era of time thing. The early 90s through to 98 were pretty gnarly in terms of our tradies. We built fast because we had building boom through that era. Whenever we build fast, people want to make as much money as possible. They take shortcuts.
Yeah.
We didn't police as hardcore as we do now. The plans weren't as detailed. People didn't build to a plan. They built to what their head told them and their clients' wishes and desires were. I love people. I really do love how we think, because our mindset was, I want to spend on this gorgeous stuff I can see, spa bath, tiles, curtains, carpet, look at this gorgeous view. Oh, but who's worrying about the structure and the insulation and the weather tightness? Until we live in it and go, oh, it's leaking. Oh no, earthquake and something's moved. Suddenly we go, all these things we've taken for granted are suddenly important. And that is what a consent is about, to look after these normal things. Now, yeah, to be fair, some of our leakers have gone through the consenting process, but be careful. How many of those buildings actually got finally signed off for the code compliance certificate? You would be surprised to find a great number have never been signed off and may never get sign off.
Yeah, I've seen some in Auckland in the last couple of years at mortgagee sales, 3 years old, 6 years old, never had a final code of compliance. Incredible.
And so again, someone somewhere eventually will buy it, right?
Yep.
They'll like the area, the zone, whatever. Auckland prices are so hot anyway, someone will buy it. Now, they may choose to buy as is, where is, and live in it just in situ. Or they may decide, look, it's never going to get sign off, but what we're going to do is take out a brand new consent to reclad it.
So before you wrap up, any final comments that you'd like to make to the listeners before we talk about how they can contact you?
Look, Mark, I wanted to thank you for this opportunity. I have spent so many years learning this stuff, talking secrets with the building industry. I really enjoy the opportunity to spread the word, as it were, and enable people to be inspired and informed and educated about what they're entering into. There are seminars on investment, there are seminars about share buying, there's seminars about all sorts of ways to gain wealth. What I'm keen is to make sure that whoever is listening out there is not buying just more debt without some golden reward at the end of it. And buildings in New Zealand are still very dear to our hearts. We are passionate about owning our own homes. We tend to like property as investments above all other things. And that's just wonderful. I'm in that category, my good self. It's something I know, something that's tried and true. However, with a little bit more information, we can go a much longer way and sleep well at night.
Just before we finish, so who do you teach as part of your job? What sort of people, and can people come to you directly?
Absolutely. So I go across the spectrum because I'm an independent. I teach building inspectors at council. I teach the building industry, real estate, property managers, house inspectors, as well as the investors, homeowners, and want to be homeowners, commercial property managers, the whole spectrum. So, if people would like to get a hold of me, they can do so and have a look at some free stuff I have on my website, www.buildingnetworks.co.nz. They could also sign up to my free advice page where I send out little snippets of free advice, new interpretations of the law, some other ideas or things that tend to come in seasonal questions and comments. And also, if there's something that you've got a specific query on and you'd like to get some consulting advice from me, then again, have a look at my website and use the contact form on buildingnetworks.co.nz, and I'd be very pleased to talk to you.
Great stuff. It's just awesome to have you on, your wealth of knowledge, and it's just great to know there's someone out there, like yourself that does it, because until recently I never even knew that you or someone like you existed. And so I'm sure listeners have really enjoyed listening to you tonight, and you'll probably have a few new people coming on board to get your newsletter. So I'd like to thank you for your time tonight, Rosie. I know you've just have been speaking all day down in Hamilton, and it's quite late right now, and you're in Auckland. So thanks very much for your time.
Look, thank you, Mark. I'm what's called a well-kept secret, and now I hope with your help I'm no longer the secret and I can be of service to your listeners.
Great work, thanks. I would really like to thank Rosie for her time with this interview. It is just great to know someone like her is out there that we can go to. We hope you enjoyed it. If you have any topics or anyone you would like interviewed, please let us know. Thanks for listening, and I hope you have a fantastic week.